Hello everyone and welcome back to another weekly reading vlog. Today is Monday and I'm actually for once starting at the beginning of the week, which is rare for me because I don't normally get my act together quick enough to do it for Monday, but we have managed it this week. So last week was actually quite a good reading week for me, not in terms of book quantity but in terms of page, as I tend to read about 50 pages per day typically, whereas last week 2 days I read 200 pages per day. So that was quite impressive for me. I was quite impressed with myself. So I'm hoping to keep the ball rolling this week, as again my uni is on strike, so I don't have that much uni. I think I'm only in 4 hours this week, if that. So I don't have a lot to do apart from read and potentially start my essay a bit early, but that won't take all week to do because I still have 3 weeks to do it. So apart from that, all I've got to do is read, which is great for me. If you watched last week's reading vlog, you'll know I started Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, this book here, and I'm currently 238 pages in. It's about 600 pages, so I shall definitely be finishing this week. So far I'm actually really enjoying it. It's quite plot driven at the moment. The plot is very much pushing the story and what is interesting me at the moment. However, I do think that will as a consequence affect the characters and make the characters more interesting, mainly because it's from 3 perspectives and 2 of those perspectives are actually married. However, they've never met each other because of the circumstances of the book, obviously. So if you didn't see that vlog, I'll just quickly explain what this is about again. So Elantris is a city in the country of, I'm gonna say, Aeolin. That's what I'm gonna say. Aeolin. Aeolin. Let's say Aeolin. So in the country of Aeolin there was a city called Elantris, and the people that lived there were worshipped like gods. So how they became these gods was completely random. It could be anyone from the country of Aeolin, and one day they would wake up and they would just be transformed into these Elantrians, which were beautiful godlike creatures. I don't know if they're like human-esque, but they're definitely godly. And then they would move to this city, Elantris, and Elantris kind of ruled Aeolin. However, 10 years ago that changed, and instead of turning them into these beautiful gods, this disease turned them into these kind of horrible, monstrous looking human creatures. So now instead of becoming beautiful, they lose all their hair, they have these black blotches all over their face, and they basically look like walking corpses, is the idea that I'm getting from it. This book starts 10 years after that happens. This follows 3 main characters, and the first is Raoden, who is a prince of the now king of Aeolin, and originally he was just a merchant, the king. However, when the disease happened 10 years ago, there was an uprising and he was the one that won that uprising basically, and he now runs a system based off how much money you earn. So the more money you earn, the more likely you are to get a title of like duke or whatever, and that obviously is a very corrupt system and is showing a lot of negative flaws. However, Raoden is this prince, but straight away he is woken up and he has this disease, so he is sent to Elantris, where they're all now kept in kind of confinement, and the whole city is in a derelict state that's pretty disgusting basically. But he also starts learning that the Elantrians aren't just humans, they are these dead creatures basically, and they're all living in excruciating pain because every time they cut themselves or hurt themselves or bump something, they can never get rid of that pain. So far his storyline is working on making Elantris a better place to live, because it currently is not, and it's quite gross. The second character that it follows is Serene, who it was betrothed to Raoden before he died. She came over to Aeolin, so she was from Teod and was the princess there, so her father is the king of Teod, and by the time she gets over to Aeolin, Raoden has died basically, and she doesn't quite trust that he's dead, but no one will tell him actually what happens because they're trying to keep it a secret that he's turned into one of these creatures. And instead she then has to work against the kind of political system because it's very negative towards women, and she's very untrustworthy of this new character who has arrived, who is trying to change the religion and therefore corrupt and destroy the whole Aeolin system. And that third character that we follow is this person that she's distrusting, and he is a priest of this religion that is trying to convert Aeolin, and it's seen as a negative to obviously the main characters because that religion is much more regimented, much more strict, and has got much more imperialistic kind of values to it. So they have used their religion previously to overpower other countries and take them over. So they obviously don't want that to happen. So Serene is trying to prevent Harathan? The names in this book are so difficult, so I'm really sorry I'm butchering them all. But she's trying to stop this priest from doing that to Aeolin because it's now her country, or she feels it's now her country and she's now the princess of it. But what I find really interesting is that Serene and Raoden knew each other kind of before. the start of this, they've been sending letters to each other and speaking kind of over the phone, but it's through this like bubble thing. If you read it, you'll get it, but I don't know how to explain it. So they kind of did know each other and they had a really good relationship, and they both think of each other still, even though they have no idea what's happened to the other person. So I'm really interested to see how they meet and how all the storylines converge, because obviously at the moment it's very easy to see how the second two storylines are interacting with each other, but Raiders just seems a little bit like it has to affect all of them, but it's not clear how it's going to affect them at the moment, especially because he doesn't seem to have any access or very little access to the outside world, so he's kind of oblivious to what they're doing, but they're not quite so oblivious to the world of Elantris, but they obviously don't know that he's in it because it's been kept a secret. So I think it's very interesting. It's not a fantasy I've ever read before, obviously. It has similar tropes like diseases and kind of patriarchal systems and corrupt governments and that kind of thing. That's quite common in fantasies, but the way it's done is so unique that I'm really enjoying it. The only problem is that I seem to pick it up when I'm really tired, and because it's quite slow paced, I would say. Like, we're this far through and not a whole lot has happened, like not massive major plot points have happened yet, or plot twists maybe is a better way of saying it. So I'm struggling to kind of keep focus, even though I'm really interested in the storyline, but I think that's more my personal tiredness, but we shall see. So I'm going to be continuing on with that this week, and then I have 2 books that are still on my February TBR that I will not be finishing this week because, let's face it, it's the end of the week. We've got 1 more week left and I'm not that fast of a reader, so I would like to make a start on some of them, but who knows. So the last 2 books I have on my TBR is A Winter's Promise by Christelle DeBoss, and I started this in January, so that's why it was on my TBR. I was just like, oh, I'll continue it in February. Didn't happen. I haven't picked it up again. I can't even remember where I was. But this is, I believe it's a children's book, or at least a young adult's book, and it was originally written in French and has been translated into English, so I'm definitely interested to see what this is like. I've had it on my shelf for forever, but from what I can gather, it's about this world where all the cities live on these individual kind of floating islands, and the magic system works within that, and the main character has just been betrothed to someone that comes from a different island, so she's going to have to move there, but that island has a negative reputation and the family has a bad reputation as well. So maybe we'll pick this up, we'll just see. I'm not fussed if I don't get to it, because what you gonna do? But that's the potential. And then the other one that was on my TBR is The Odyssey by Homer and translated by Emily Wilson. So I did start this. I read the first like 10 pages of the introduction, so I think there's like 90 pages of the introduction, but once I get past that I think it will be quite quick to read, because obviously it's all written in verse, because obviously it was originally an oral poem, so hopefully I can get to that. I do find it really interesting. The bit that I just read was about the oral tradition and how it's uncertain who Homer is and whether or not he was the actual author, how it's unlikely that he was, or that he was one person. So interesting to see about that, and I'm sure the introduction will have a lot more interesting stuff about it, especially about the different translations, which is what kind of interests me. So we shall get to that hopefully. I do want to read that, but who knows. So one thing I did want to say, or I did want to show you, was that I was bad and I ordered some books online and they arrived today, so I thought I'd do a little mini unboxing because I've never done that before on my channel. It's exciting. It was very hard not to open this straight away, but I resisted, even though it's only been like an hour since I got them. But here we are. They're heavy. There's only 2 books. I know what they are, but I think one is going to be big because that is a hefty package. So if we can get to it, maybe I should get it. So yeah, I was very naughty and probably shouldn't have bought these, but what can you do? It had to be done. They were on offer. I'm literally about to kill this out myself.
5 hours later.
Exciting! Okay, so the first book I have is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, and I got this because I saw a review on Murphy Napier's channel and she absolutely raved about it. So I think she is quite a well-read fantasy person and has quite a good opinion on fantasy, So I wanted to try this out and see, oh, it's got a sticker thing on it, and see whether or not it is as good as it gets. I also saw it recommended on another channel, but I can't remember what that channel is right now. So I was definitely interested to see it, and both videos were one after the other on my YouTube thing. So I kind of had to pick it up because YouTube was telling me something. So I picked this up, very excited to read it. So maybe we'll read that next. Maybe I just want to read everything. I can't do it. So yes, this, I have no idea what it's about. I don't really want to know. I feel like I'm the worst YouTuber for books ever because I never read the synopsis of books myself. If someone recommends it, I tend to just buy it and then go into it and see if I like it. So not very helpful, I know, but when I read it, I'll tell you more about it. But yeah, so I got that, and it has dragons in it. I feel like I'm gonna have a Dragatastic month, but who's complaining? So that's the first book I got. Then look how beautiful this cover is. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you can see it properly. Hopefully you can. On the back it says, "A shadow has fallen over the Teresian Republic." Dun, dun, dun. But this is A Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward. This is book 1 in the Legacy trilogy. So this is going to be a trilogy, and it's freaking massive. It is 768 pages. It's almost 800 pages long. So it's a hefty boy. This is meant to be, I think, quite politically heavy. It's been recommended as similar to Game of Thrones apparently, but it's not quite as dark. So I'll be interested to see that. I haven't read Game of Thrones, so I've watched some of this series, but I got a bit bored because there was a lot to watch. So sorry for all the fans of Game of Thrones out there. I will try and finish it one day. But this looks so cool, and I'm not gonna lie, I only looked into it originally because I saw it on Instagram. It looked beautiful. I wanted it. But then when I looked it up, it was £25, which is expensive for a book. So I didn't get it, but then I've checked again online and it was a little bit cheaper. Perhaps not as cheaper as I would have liked, but it was like the normal price for normal hardback. So I had to get it. So I did. This is meant to be a special signed edition. Let me see if I can find the signature. I found the signature. Oh, look at those bright orange end bit. I do like some orange. There's the signature there. I don't know if that's worth the extra like £15 that it was for that, but there you go. But I'm very excited. Oh, it's got a map there. So yeah, I probably won't be getting to this, sadly, for a while, just because I don't know if you've seen my previous video, but it was an announcement for reading Pride of the Orange Tree, which is starting on Sunday, so that will not be in this vlog, even though it will be Sunday, because I'm going to be doing a separate reading vlog just for that. And then I know that on the 3rd of March, Sarah J Maas's new book is coming out, and I know for a fact that that is a big book as well. So I have a lot of big books on my TBR to be reading right now. So maybe this is the year of big books, but there we go. So that's the book that I've got. So yeah, so those are the books that I got. As I have so many books now that I have to read, I think it's about time I actually got to reading. So I shall catch you up later. Mark now with Elantris. I am on 372 pages, so I have roughly about 200 pages left. So I am starting to really enjoy this. I think it might be a 5-star read, at least a 4.5 at the moment, and it's so much better than I expected it to be. So this is the first Brandon Sanderson, or will be the first Brandon Sanderson that I've read completely. I have listened on audiobook to The Way of Kings about halfway through, but because it is so long and it has so much detail and so many character names and different storylines, I was really struggling to follow it along through the audiobook without reading it, because when I listen to audiobooks I normally do it when I'm doing something else, so like walking to uni or whatever. So I wasn't reading it with the book as well, and I think I definitely would have needed to do that if I was going to listen to the audiobook. So I did stop reading that or listening to that and decided to put it aside for whenever I could physically pick it up. However, I won't be picking it up until the end of the year because of the way this readathon's working out, which I'm really excited for. But this will be the first Brandon Sanderson, therefore, that I've completed in a whole, and it is so much better than I was expecting it to be. Way of Kings was a much more heavy, I suppose this is very political, but it's much more kind of traditional fantasy feel to it, I thought anyway, from what I can remember. Whereas this is just a little bit more different. It is definitely a fantasy, but war is not at the forefront of it. It's definitely more focused on the political dynamics of what religion can do to a society, what disease can do and therefore class can do, and a shift in kind of political hierarchy. So as I was saying, the merchants of this society became the kings when the Elantrians fell. So they're still struggling to kind of create a balance with that new dynamic, and it's not really working. And that as a consequence affects everything else, as well as the whole disease thing, and it's just starting to get really good. So at the moment, like, I just sat down to read, and normally I'm quite bad at like counting pages and thinking, oh, I need to get to this page, I need to read 10 more pages and then I can finish. But I haven't felt like I was doing that. As I was sitting reading there, I literally just read like 30 pages super quickly without even noticing it that it was going by. So that is definitely a good sign for a book for me, because that rarely happens, and I'm just so excited to see where this goes. Something really interesting and like kind of funny, and not funny, but I think will definitely stir up something, and I'm excited to see where it goes, has just happened. I can't really tell you what it is without spoiling it, but it's to do with the third perspective, but I'm really interested to see how that storyline now plays out, because it's completely different from like 2 seconds before. So that's fun, and I'm excited for that as well, because that third storyline with the priest I wasn't enjoying as much as the other two storylines. I much preferred reading them, and getting through his part was just a bit of a drag. He is smaller, like I don't think there's as many, or the chapters aren't as big when it comes to him, so it wasn't that difficult to get through. I think that was definitely a deliberate part from Brandon Sanderson to make his part slightly smaller, because they were just slightly drier and less gritty than the other ones. But I'm actually now excited to read his parts because of what's happened, so the tables have turned. But I'm super excited to get this finished now, and I just want to power through and read it all today, but I don't think that's going to happen, because 200 pages is a lot to read, especially because I know I said I did it twice last week, but this is so much more dense, and even if you look at the size, like this is a paperback, and like there's so many more words on the page than there was in the hardback that I was reading at that point. I could read that book more quickly, and it was just easier in general to read, but I am picking up my pace with reading this, so I'm super excited to get to it. I really want to pick up the new books that I bought yesterday, or that arrived yesterday, so that might be, I might have to just dismiss the rest of my February TBR to get to that after I finish this, because I'm super excited to get to it. And I feel like it's Tuesday today, so I still have tomorrow, Thursday and Friday to read before the end of the month. So if I get a massive chunk of this done today, I could finish it tomorrow and potentially get another book in, hopefully, if it's quick to read. So we shall try and challenge and read 2 books in 1 week, which I haven't done, and I rarely do because I'm such a slow reader, but the challenge is there. So yeah, I'm very much enjoying this. If you're at all interested in starting fantasy, I think this would be actually quite a good way to get into adult fantasy, because it has the elements of fantasy at its like core, but the way it does it is so interesting, and whilst you still get that fantasy feel from it, it does feel a little bit more relaxed around that and a bit more easy to get into. So would recommend, if you haven't read fantasy before but you want to read an adult fantasy, or want to start reading adult fantasies and you've already read YA fantasies, I would definitely give this one a go. And then that would obviously be like a good stepping stone into more typical fantasy, as his later books, I think, become more like that. So would recommend so far. We shall see how it goes at the end. So I finished Elantris, and it was so good. I loved it. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I don't even know what to say. I just really enjoyed it. I thought the world was so interesting, and it constantly kept me engaged, and I was constantly wanting to know what was going to happen next, how it was all going to fit together, how that world kind of was going to interact with the characters, and what originally went wrong with it. So I think it was such an amazing book. I don't know what to say. I'm literally like the worst person to describe books that I like, just because I have no idea what to say. But I just, yeah, it was so good. I would highly recommend, if you are at all interested in reading any of Brandon Sanderson's books, or are a fantasy lover of any sort, definitely this is one that you have to pick up. I did say that this was a standalone, and I do believe it was intentionally meant to be a standalone. However, on Goodreads it does say that there is to be 2 more books. However, I don't think they're going to be coming out for a very long time, because there's a little note on it from Brandon Sanderson saying that they're not going to come out until 3 of the other books are coming out. So I don't think you need to wait till those books come out if that's what you're waiting for. I definitely think it's worth reading now, and I definitely think as it was meant to be a standalone, it can definitely be read as a standalone and you still get as much enjoyment out of it as possible. I would love to see more of these characters and more of this world and how it goes, but I'm also satisfied with this as a standalone. I'm not left kind of hanging or wanting to know that much more, that I'm frustrated that the book has ended. I'm sad that the book has ended because I didn't want it to. It was so good, and I just kind of, I feel like I steamrolled through it just because I wanted to know what was going to happen. Like, I just couldn't put it down and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I literally pretty much spent 2 days straight just reading it, and it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. So yeah, it was a good book. The ending didn't ruin it for me. I always think you can't judge a book until you've read the ending, because that ending is just so important, I think anyway. If a book has a bad ending, then I can't give it as good a rating as I was probably expecting to give it. But this just made sure that it definitely was a 5-star read, which is not what I expected at all. I was not going into this thinking it was going to be a 5-star read. In fact, I thought it might be a bit drab and a bit kind of tiresome to get through, because it is Brandon Sanderson's first published book, I believe. I think it was published in something like 2005 maybe, so it's quite old. I mean, that's not old, but you know, but there you go. So would definitely recommend. The characters, the plot, the ending, especially for the third perspective, the development he goes through as a character is just quite astounding and just so intriguing that I would definitely recommend. I know I'm not giving it that good of a review because I don't know what to say, but I feel like I have said quite a lot about it throughout the last few clips as well, and they all withstand as well. So the plot, the characters, the development, the changing of the entire system and the whole world is just so good, so good. And the romance in it. There's like a hint of romance. Don't let that throw you off if you're not a romancy kind of person. It's kind of more drip fed through it, that it's not so big of a major point. I do quite like a romance in a fantasy, so I like that bit a lot, but there you go. Would recommend. So the next book I think I'm going to pick up is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter, which is the book that I hauled the other day. And that's just because it's sitting on my shelf. I want to read it. I want to read a new book that I just bought, because it's not like I've got 50 million other books that I haven't read already. But I really want to read it just because the review that I listened to was really persuasive, so I want to get to it. It's about 500 and so pages, so I don't think I'll finish it by the end of the week, as it's Wednesday today and I'm not going to get a chance to read it till this evening today. And then I do actually have to do some uni work because I haven't done that because I've been reading Elantris. So we've got to get back on the uni bandwagon. So I'll be taking this a little bit of a slower pace, hopefully, possibly, maybe, depending on how good it is. And it's a debut novel. Again, I don't know too much about it. I tend to not pay attention to synopsis just because when I think going into books it's so much more interesting to not know anything about them. So I can't really tell you much about this. But as I get more into it, I shall tell you more. Hello, so it's currently Sunday, so I haven't updated you for 2 days, and that's mainly because I have done barely any reading. I've done what I always do when I finish a book and slowed right down and not done anything with it. So I haven't got very far into The Rage of Dragons. I'm about 100 pages through, so I've only read 100 pages in the last 3 days. So a bit disappointed with that. I would have liked to have got further with it, just because I would have liked to kept up the good reading that I had for the last half of February. However, I did let it slip a little bit at the end, but that's okay. Today it's March the 1st, we are on a new day, a new month, and we'll get back on the reading bandwagon. And hopefully I can read much more over the entire month, because if you didn't see my TBR that just went up, it's big, it's chunky, it's a lot to read. So I'm getting more nervous now that it's the start of the month, and this isn't even on the TBR. This wasn't on the TBR, so I need to finish this and then start on my TBR. So my original thoughts of this is that there's a lot of information in it. It's not info dumping at all. That's not kind of what I mean. I think it would almost be better if it was slightly a little bit more info dumping, just because there seems to be a lot of key names, key places, terminology, which is clearly used a lot within the society. However, I have no idea what it means. I don't know how it kind of works or anything, and some of the terminologies we are finding out as the main character finds out as well. They're obviously very few and far between because he obviously lives in that society and he knows most of what he's talking about. So that's the only kind of problem I've found that's at the moment making it quite difficult to get into. It's just that I don't understand a lot of the terminology that's used. It's not massively overdone, like there's not loads of things in it that I don't understand. It's not like I've read 100 pages and I have no idea what's going on. That's not the problem. I just feel like I'd be more invested in the world if I knew what these terms meant and how they related to the world. There has been action that's happened. So there was a raid at quite near the start, which is apparently quite common within the society. The prologue is very heavy action, so that was fun to read, I suppose. It's quite long, but apart from that I'm not really sure where the main storyline is going yet. I have no clue. It all seems to be pretty going to plan at the moment. Nothing big's happened that's out of the ordinary, or not necessarily out of the ordinary, but big plot devising things that's going to change the way the plot's going. So I'm interested to finally get to that point. Normally that happens around the 100-page mark. I always kind of think you need to read at least 100 pages of a book before you decide to DNF it or dislike it or something, just because that's typically when the plot starts to get a bit faster. So excited to get to that. I'm going to do a little bit more reading this afternoon and hopefully get to that point. But apart from that, another thing actually, the chapters in this are set out really strangely. So if I show you, they're kind of subsectioned. So like here's the prologue, the chapters are the same, so you've got the prologue as like a main title page, and then it's got like subsections within it. Like for chapter 1 that's the first subsection, and then a couple of pages later there'll be another one. So I don't know if you can actually see that, if that's actually on screen. So it's strange to read that like that, and it's almost jarring because it's not like each of the subsections are from different points of views. They are some of the time just straight going on from what happened before. So I'm not really sure what the point of that is or what that adds to the book. I don't think it does add to the book, that kind of subsectioning. So I don't know what that's about. But if you were subsectioning in a chapter, I feel like you would normally just put a little gap between the paragraph. But I feel like you'd only do that as well if it was a change in perspectives, where this is not often. So I don't know what that's about, but it's a new style, I suppose. So yes, that's the Rage of Dragons going so far. Hopefully I will finish it next week, this week, in a few days, hopefully. I have big plans because I need to get on with my TBR. But yes, apart from that, not sure how I'm going, not sure how I feel about it. I shall let you know. So the other thing I have started today is Priory the Orange Tree, because it is the start of my readathon that I am hosting. If you didn't know already or want to join in, you're not too late. Please do if you want to. And I've split it down so it's about 30 pages a day across 4 weeks. So I have read the first 30 pages of that. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'm doing a separate vlog for it, so if you want to see that, that'll be going up on Saturday. I think this is going up on Wednesday. So feel free to check in on that. But yes, I have read the first 30 pages of that today. So I think that's me. I'm going to round up this vlog now. So I hope you've had a good week. I hope your reading week has been good. I feel like I've not been as productive as last week, but I still enjoyed it. I had a fun week. I read a new favourite. It was Brandon Sanderson's Elantris, which seems like ages ago now, but I know it wasn't. So that's crazy, but yeah. So I hope, again, that you've enjoyed this. I've said that about 10 times. Give it a like if you do. Please subscribe to my channel if you like me and the books that I talk about and the things that I do. And I shall see you in the next video.